society tells us, especially as women, that everybody else needs to be important. For those who are parents, your kids have to be important. For those who are partners, your partner has to be important. And it comes at our own expense. And it's really sad that we fall into this trap of thinking that we're our worth is really based on how well we take care of other people.
Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. I'm your host, Celia Antonio, women's empowerment mentor, mindfulness expert, and quantum self-love coach. Every week, you'll hear real and unfiltered stories from me and my guests covering topics around spirituality, self-expression, womanhood, healing, love, relationships, and more. My intention with this podcast is to help sensitive, spiritual, ambitious women fully step into their potential so that you can live a life you love with every cell and every fiber of your being. And I get that it's not easy to fit into a box, so I bring in a variety of topics to feed your multifaceted self. You can find me over on Instagram at self-expressbabe, and info on where to find my guests are always going to be in the show notes below. I am so grateful that you're here, and I invite you to now set an intention, sit back, relax, and receive what is coming through to you on your headphones right now. Take what resonates, leave out what doesn't, and give yourself time to reflect. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's dive in. Hello, welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. I'm your host, Celia Antonio. On today's episode, we have a guest by the name of Phebe Brako-Owusu. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Phebe and I actually connected in 2020 over on Instagram. She has a podcast where she shares immigrant stories, and I really liked that. And I shared my immigrant story with her, and she read it for her podcast. So we've been connected since 2020. So I'm very glad that 2 years later, we get to sit down and have this conversation. I get to meet her virtually and see her face. So this was very lovely to bring this together. I'm so grateful for the internet. In this conversation, we talk about self-love and boundaries. Most of the conversation ends up being around setting boundaries and what comes up when we try to set boundaries, what Phebe has seen come up with her clients around boundaries, and all of that stuff. A little bit more about Phebe before we dive in. Phebe was born and raised in Ghana, and she learned the importance of mental health and wellness when she started college. You're going to hear a little bit about her college experience. Phebe is an award-winning, trauma-trained, licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice based in Tacoma, Washington. Phebe is passionate about serving people of color and immigrants. She also hosts a podcast called Immistories with Phebe. I will put that link in the show notes so that you can check that out. And yeah, let's dive into this really beautiful and lovely episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Phebe, for being on the Openly Spoken podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Celia. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your podcast, the work that you're doing, and, having me on here, too.
Thank you. This is cool, too, that we're connecting, like, in person for the second, not in person, but, like, kind of in person, since I can see you on video.
Yeah, this is, I guess this is what we can call, in person for now until, things get better for us and we can actually feel each other in the same space.
Yeah. But it's cool that I think we've been connected for 2 years on Instagram.
You know what? Yes. That sounds about right, because I started my account in 2020. So at the very beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
Feels forever ago.
Yeah, I know. It feels like so long ago. So I'm going to put, for those of you listening, I'll put a link to Phoebe's podcast. And she shares immigrant stories. and I wrote to her my story, and she read that in the podcast. So I'll put that link in the show notes.
Yeah.
But for people who are just meeting you for the first time, let's give a little intro about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So my name is Phebe Brako-Owusu. I'm an immigrant from Ghana. By profession, by day, I would say, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I got my degree in marriage and family therapy. So I ended up getting my license in that. And even though my license is in MFT, I do a lot of individual work. So I spend a lot of my working day supporting individuals and couples who are going through the everyday work stress, family stress, you name it, traumas. A lot of my clients are immigrants like myself who are trying to figure out their lives away from home. So I like to call myself an immigrant therapist who is supporting immigrants as they build a home away from home. So that's a big part of who I am today. A lot of the work that I do, and I'm based out of the Tacoma area. I just moved my office to a place called University Place. It's right on the outskirts of Tacoma. So I love the work that I do. I'm a mom also to three boys. They take everything that's left inside of me, outside of work. Yeah. So yeah, I have my baby turns 1 tomorrow, and it's almost unbelievable. I got pregnant during the pandemic, so I have a little pandemic baby, as they call them. So yeah, so that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you help people that can relate to your own background coming from a different country. I feel like there aren't enough. And also with your podcast, like I feel like as immigrants, there aren't enough voices for us.
Yeah.
There aren't enough stories being shared because there's a lot of shame and fear. At least like with me growing up, there was a lot of like, don't tell anyone where you're from or your situation because like you could be deported or whatever. What's happening. Yeah.
That is so real. That is so real. Very true. Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about today a little bit about self-love and investing in yourself. And you did mention that even though you're a marriage and family therapist, you do work with people on the individual level. And I think that's a perfect thing to bring up of how change and transformation really starts within us and with how we show up in our families, how we show up in our relationships. And from there, just from that interchange, like so much can shift.
Absolutely. Because when we take care of ourselves, we can take care of others, right? If you're not doing something for yourself, if you don't know what it looks like to value yourself, protect yourself, take care of yourself, how are you going to do that for others? How are you going to know what it even looks like to do that for others? So it's very, very important work. And that's one of the things that I keep reminding my clients of, that this world that we live in, it's tough, it's crazy, it's all over the place, especially these days, right?
Yeah.
So we owe it to ourselves to take better care of ourselves, right? We get only one body. We get only one mind. We get only one spirit, only one soul. We have to protect what we get to have, the privilege of being in these bodies that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. It's very, very important. And we also find ourselves in a society these days that there's a lot of talk about self-care, and what does self-care even look like? We don't always know what that looks like.
And usually those like mainstream things of self-care, it's like face masks or retail therapy or what else? Like buying luxury items.
Yes.
And
Yes,
it's
yes.
not, and it's like, there's never mentioned like working through limiting beliefs or
Mhm.
healing trauma that you're still carrying around into every future
Mhm.
like situation.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, and it's so important that you even bring that up because self-care can also look like setting boundaries. And that's one of the things that I work a lot with my clients on. Because if you're setting boundaries, you're respecting yourself, you're valuing your time, your resources. And I'm not even talking like monetary or physical resources. I'm talking energy,
Yeah.
brain power, right? If you are the one that people go to when they need questions answered, when they need airport pickups, when they
Mm-hmm.
need, you know, a brain to pick, every now and then they have questions. And I've been there before, right? I've
Yeah.
been the I call myself, the encyclopedia and Google for my entire family, for example, right? Because everybody comes to me. And part of it is also like the role that I play in my family. I'm the first child, I'm the first daughter, and I was also the first to move to America, to immigrate here. So I
Mhm.
have years of experience that my family does not have. And, I've learned about the system in ways that they might not be aware of. And I found myself answering everything, from insurance to how to buy a car to credit worthiness, you name it, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of the clients that I work with are also faced with these kinds of things where they are stretched thin because
Yeah.
they're taking care of everybody and everything and answering all these different questions, and they realize I'm getting resentful. I don't know what to do.
Mm.
I'm tired. Everybody keeps coming to me and they keep drawing from me. And part of that self-care is being able to put a full stop here.
Yeah.
Okay. What are you going to do about this? And how much can you give? Okay, I can give $200 to support the family and I can't give anything more than that, right? So in
Mhm.
many ways, you're honoring yourself, you're honoring your culture, you're honoring everything that you want to, and you're also protecting your pockets too. you know
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What do you see come up? What do you see that like comes up a lot when clients are setting boundaries for the first time?
Fear.
Fear.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of fear around how is this person going to feel, fear around hurting
Mm.
people too, and thinking that boundaries are meant to hurt people, because when people think about boundaries, a lot of times they think about it as very rigid, like,
Mhm.
oh, Phoebe, are you trying to tell me that I can't take dinner over to my cousin's house every night? Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that perhaps you can pick the nights that you take dinner over to them, or you can actually use this thing called meal delivery. Hey, how about Uber Eats, DoorDash, or even contacting like the actual restaurant? Because there's talk about how these companies are taking away so much money from these smaller local businesses. So you can even
Yeah.
reach out to the restaurant yourself, right? So that's kind of what it comes down to. People are afraid. They're afraid of how people are going to react. They're afraid that they're going to lose the relationships and people are going to get mad at them and they're not going to know how to be able to handle the emotional outbursts. Forgetting that the emotional outbursts are not even for them to handle. Like, that's on them. If they
Yeah.
have this kind of reaction, then that's on them. That has nothing to do with you. And perhaps you need to reassess your investment in this relationship in the first place. If you setting a boundary with them is going to threaten the relationship, it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't have to be, you know, cut cut dry. Like, it's not, it doesn't have to be a straight line.
Yeah.
Boundaries can also be malleable. You could
Yeah.
share a boundary and someone can say, hey, but have you thought about this and that? Because we all have blinders, and so they might bring up some
Mm.
blinders and it's something that you haven't considered, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I could rethink this boundary. And but also, we also know that people know that, and people know that, and they will try to push the envelope a little bit and try to push
Yeah.
against the boundary.
Yeah. And then it's up to you to protect that boundary because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, we teach people how to treat us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. People are going to treat us the way we allow them to treat us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
also brought up a few things there, like you brought up how okay, something that you said about like we're afraid how people are going to react or how it's going to make us feel. I think
Mhm,
I can so relate to that because that's also my issue with boundaries. But I
mhm,
also sometimes have a little think about it and I'm like, that's really funny that like we're so worried about hurting other people's feelings that like we hurt ourselves in the process
mhm,
by
mhm,
like being like,
mhm.
oh yeah, I can come help you move on Saturday at 6 a.m. even though I work until 10 p.m. on Friday night. Like, yeah, I'll come help you. You know,
I've been there before. Listen,
I've
I
been
have
there
been
too.
there before.
It's a little
Yeah,
silly
yeah.
that like we'll be like so worried about others that
Mhm, mhm.
we don't treat ourselves that same way.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
where we're
yeah,
kind of like subconsciously or subtly saying that like everyone else is more important than me.
yeah. And I mean, think about it this way too, Celia. Society tells us, especially as women, that everybody else needs to be important. For those who are parents, your
Yeah.
kids have to be important. For those who are partners, your partner has to be important. For
Mm-hmm.
those in families, oh, your family has to be important. You have to do this. You have to sacrifice yourself and, take care of everybody. And it
Yeah.
comes at our own expense. And it's really sad that we fall into this trap of thinking that we're our worth is really based on how well we take care of other people too.
Yeah. So how could someone listening take like the first step to loving themselves more and to going away from doing everything for everyone else and
Mhm.
develop that deeper connection for themselves? I know there's like a million tips, but
You're right.
what's popping up in your mind? Like what's coming up for you?
I think that the first thing is to acknowledge the issue, right? Acknowledging that, for example, I have difficulty in showing myself love, right? And
Mm-hmm.
being able to embrace that there's work to be done. And just being able to sit in that, right? That this is an issue and not trying to make excuses or trying to walk around the issue. Another step that would follow that is being able to have conversations with others around this sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and others being people who can support you, like a licensed, therapist, you know, like myself, shameless plug. and also creating a picture of what that could look like. What would it look like if I woke up tomorrow and I loved myself in its entirety?
Mm,
I would be waking up on time. I would start my day off with a meditation. I would actually, make time to take a shower and put on my best face, and use that perfume that's been sitting underneath my sink for a while that I've been saving only for special occasions, right?
yeah.
Sometimes it's these little things when it comes to taking care of our bodies, moving our bodies, right? Using the right kind of product on our skin, right?
Mm,
Eating the things that would nourish us, eating the
yeah.
things that, feel good, and, drinking your water and minding your business too. That's another big part. But no, seriously, like staying hydrated,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Hey, and
taking
minding your
taking care.
business is a huge one because if you're not, then you're gossiping, and that's taking gossiping and judgment takes so much of your energy.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. It sure does. But I think definitely taking care of the physical body that you find yourself in is super important. That's one really, really important step. And also starting to imagine what a life of boundaries could look like, a life with healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
Where do your needs come in here, and where do others' needs also come in? And being able to draw a line, right? Now, it's not a wall, it's not a, sort of brick wall or anything. It's just a line of what am I able to offer? What would I like others to offer me? And
Mhm.
where do we separate the two, right? How am I able to meet other people's needs?
Yeah.
and what am I not able to, right? So a big thing here is being able to think about what your needs are. What are the things that could, for example, make your day better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would you like for your roommates to be a little bit more quiet in the morning and not make a whole lot of noise? How can you communicate that? Hey, you know, the mornings are kind of tough sometimes for me, so I would really appreciate it if you didn't start off the day with your reggaeton blasting, right? If you can play it in your headphones or anything like that. You don't have to put it on the stereo. Not all of us have to hear it in the morning, okay? I'm trying to start my day a little bit more quietly and ease into my day. Maybe in the afternoon we can, jam to some reggaeton, just not at 7 in the morning, please. You know,
So
and
funny.
being right, being able to just assess what your needs are and clearly communicate what they are. And of course, that is no guarantee that somebody is going to be able to meet your needs. Your roommate might be like, Psh, my headphones are broken, or I don't like the headphones. I like it when the room vibrates a little bit. Then that's a whole different kind of conversation, right? But
Yeah.
at least you've tried. At least you've put
Yeah.
your needs out there and said, hey, this is what would make my day better.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Or
That's
sometimes,
definitely a start.
yeah, for sure. Or sometimes what's really difficult is like maybe the roommate will read the text message in a negative way that like
Yes.
you're yelling at them or something when you're just expressing your needs. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the toughest parts.
That is so true. And that's why some of these conversations do not need to happen over text message.
Oh yeah,
Right?
for sure.
We've gotten so
Yeah.
used to technology and texting and all that. And I'm guilty of it. Listen, my mom lives with us and she'll be in her room, I'll be in my room, and we'll be texting each other.
Oh, that's funny.
We'll be texting each other and maybe sometimes before going to sleep, she'll text me like, oh, what time do you start work tomorrow morning? And I was like, oh, I start at 9 o'clock. Yeah, okay, well, good night. I'm like, good night. Or it could be, she's downstairs and she'll text me like, yo, so what are we eating for dinner tonight? You know? But certain things get lost in there, right?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and text messages are definitely open to interpretation because people are going to interpret it based on the moods that they're in, the kind of day they're having, their past traumas, things that may
Yeah.
have been communicated over text messages in the past that shouldn't have, and
Mm-hmm.
how that may have been harmful. There's so many factors. So if
Yeah.
possible, I recommend that we have some of these conversations up front. If it means just knocking on the door and be like, hey, blah blah blah. And I also want to add that I understand that some of these face-to-face conversations are tough,
Yeah.
and sometimes we fall into the pattern of texting because it feels safe, right?
Safer.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
protective piece around it, and I value that, and there's always time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you support people through taking that leap to like doing that face-to-face conversations? Are there like little exercises you give them?
Sometimes we'll practice in session.
Mm,
You know,
okay.
we'll kind of do a role play in session and we'll go through it. And another thing that I've been recommending, especially for my Black and African American women who are very much into shows like Insecure and really Insecure and HBO, and really like it resonates with them, especially the main character Issa. I tell them to be like Issa, stand in front of the mirror and have that conversation with yourself, right? Just have a dialogue play out what you're wanting to say, practice it in front of the mirror, get your facial expressions down, be like, okay, listen, I know we talked about this last week, but I need you to stop touching my lunch in the fridge. I don't appreciate that, right? Just kind of having it play out in the mirror, seeing how
Yeah.
it feels, getting the word out. It's almost like practicing for a play,
For
right?
a play.
And
Yeah.
doing that as many times as possible. I think we've kind of been, as adults, we get a little jaded and think that we're supposed to just do things out of the blue or let things just kind of fly and be able
Mm-hmm.
to perform and just do things. And we lose that innocence that we used to have as children when we used to practice things, and we used to practice for plays. For those of us who were, who did plays, I did a number of plays kind of growing up. so, so, you know, that's one of the things I feel like we lose, but it's still very relevant. It's still very helpful for us to practice, get the words out, form the sentences, look in the mirror, and talk to yourself. Hype yourself up like you would see Issa doing on Insecure. Have all those conversations, the positive affirmations if you need to, and then you get that level of comfort to be able to go have that conversation. So that those are two of the big ones that I usually go to, just kind of doing it in session, getting it out there. And even especially for those who deal with anxiety, we talk about what the worst case scenarios are, right? What's the worst thing you think is going to happen here? And then we process it. And I tell them, listen, us talking about this and exploring this worst case scenario, or you giving yourself those like 10 minutes to go through the worst case scenario and everything, if it actually does happen, guess what? You've been here before. So you already have that exposure, right? You've been in the room already where you think that, your pants are going to fall down to your ankle in front of everybody, right? Then you're going to embarrass yourself. You've been here before. So you have one leg in the door already. So
yeah,
it happens. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? Then that worst case scenario that you thought about was just that, the worst case scenario. And you can put it to the side and move on.
I feel like you read my mind with that question, because that's what I was wondering, because I've practiced stuff in the mirror too. And just the leading up to difficult conversations, I always have a lot of anxiety. But in the moment, it'll be there in the beginning, and then it passes. But practicing almost makes me feel more nervous. So yeah, I feel like you read my mind with that question. With that answer.
I think what part of what makes us nervous is that we're trying to predict the future, right? And our mind is trying to tell us, hey, this is what is actually going to happen, when for many reasons we don't actually know that that's what's going to happen. Yeah.
So true. I'm curious too, you mentioned that you have 3 kids, and we're talking about self-love and taking that time for yourself, and you said that they take what's left of you in between work and everything else you have going on. So how do you make time for your own self-love?
Yeah, that's a very great question. I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret here. I hide it in my office.
You hide it in your office?
I hide in my office.
Oh, you hide in your office?
I will hang out here sometimes if I don't have a session. Maybe if someone, for example, cancels or doesn't show up. I just sit in here and I close my eyes. I turn off all the lights. So because of the pandemic, I started working from home a lot more, and so I turned my closet into my office. And so I'll just turn off the lights and just sit here in the dark. Right. And sometimes I'll put on, I have this, one of my favorite playlists on Spotify is called the Deep Focus playlist. And so it's very nice, cool, just breezy music, just instrumentals, no words. And I just listen to it. Right. And I take lots of deep breaths. There's times that, I might doze off, and those can be a little dangerous. But that's one of the things that I do. But outside of that, when it comes to self-care, it's personal for me, right? It's work that I'm still doing, right? So what that looks like is sometimes, I struggle with taking the time when I go to get my nails done. I tell myself I'm gonna do this once a month, right? I'm gonna go get my nails done, and sometimes I forget. So one thing I've been challenging myself to do is put it on the calendar. Because for professionals like myself, if you don't put it on the calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So as a working mom, putting things on the calendar, I put my kids' appointments on the calendar. I put, everything else on the calendar. Why not my own self-care?
Yeah.
Because it allows for me to be intentional about it. It's not like if I have time today, I'll go do this. Or if I have time. No. At the beginning of I think no, not beginning of the year, maybe middle to later part of last year, I used to go floating, right? And so I would schedule that. It was something on my calendar, and I let my family know. I put it on the calendar downstairs. We have a family calendar downstairs, and so I put it on there that mom's gone
Mm-hmm.
from 3 p.m. on Sundays to go on Sundays. I haven't gone lately because I recently locked my hair, and I'm not sure how the salt water is going to do with my locks. And I love my hair a lot, so
Yeah.
I haven't gone yet. But I think I've gone to a point where I'm a little bit more comfortable and I know what to do with my hair, so I'm going to get back into it. But putting things on the schedule, putting things on the calendar, makes it happen. You have a reminder that goes with it. You're taking it seriously, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that helps me going. Hanging with friends when I'm able to, whether online or in person, and also taking myself out for a good meal. I love going out to eat by myself. I really do.
Yeah. Oh,
It's very nice. It's very calming. I used to be a little bit embarrassed about it when I was, much younger. I used to think people would judge me and think that I was a loner or something like that. And so what if they do? But
yeah.
but I've gone to that point where I appreciate just sitting at a table by myself or sitting in a booth by myself and not having to, stretch over my arms to feed other people and telling people to stop spilling stuff and don't throw this at your brother and, don't just give me that, so
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
doesn't turn into a mess there. So that's kind of what my self-care looks like. And I do a fair share of listening. I do audiobooks every month. I try to do at least one audiobook a month. I just finished this month's book, and it's only the 19th. Woohoo!
Woo.
So yeah, I just finished listening to Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi.
I love that you mentioned that when you were younger, you thought it was weird if people would eat out alone. I could totally relate to that. But eating out by yourself is such a vibe. It's awesome. Like you could just you keep yourself company, and also you don't have to do any cleaning afterwards. That's my favorite part. I
Yeah,
cook a
there's
lot
no
at home too.
cleaning. Yeah. I've been trying to cook a lot more these days. I kind of fell out of it a little bit because just in pregnancy, that was one of my aversions. I couldn't stand cooking and standing over the heat of a stove and smelling all of the different aromas. Yeah, I struggled with it, so I kind of fell off that. But I've been trying to get into it these days, and I love to cook and trying to get creative. Like last night, I made yesterday, not last night. Yesterday, I made a honey sriracha chicken for my family, and I just put it in the crock pot, right? And it just cooked while I was working. I came downstairs during one of my breaks and came and shredded the chicken, and that was it. We had food for the evening, So yeah, just being open to trying out new things, new recipes, new ways of cooking, and just flowing with that.
I just stayed at an Airbnb when I visited my family, and they had some cookbooks. And I took a bunch of pictures. I tried one of the recipes yesterday. We made it was a carrot coconut curry soup. It was so good.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was and it was so easy. Just maybe 5 ingredients. It was so good.
Wow, that sounds really good.
It was good. I'll send you the recipe if you want it.
Yeah. Oh, please do. Yeah, I remember making a carrot soup. I think it was some months ago. I don't remember exactly what, but I think it was a ginger carrot soup. And I remember it being really, really good. I'm gonna have to find that recipe again. Probably on my Pinterest. I have so many different pins on my Pinterest. So.
Yeah. Pinterest is good for recipes.
Oh yeah.
Okay, going back. Well, I was gonna say going back to topic, but I think cooking and eating is totally self-love. But
yes,
you mentioned something earlier about how you put your self-care on a calendar, and that you are being intentional with it by putting it on the calendar. And I think that ties back to how we were saying earlier about how we are also important, instead of treating everyone else as, oh, how are they going to react? Treating yourself as important too. And my mind is losing where I was going with this.
Totally fine. Totally fine.
But that's the flow of the podcast, I guess. But I love that you mentioned that, because like it's not it's not selfish for your relationships to pour into you, because then the relationships you have are better.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have, like we mentioned earlier about like, oh yeah, I'll help you move on a Saturday morning, 6 a.m., even though I worked until 10 p.m. I would rather have a friend come help me that wants to be there, instead of
Mm-hmm.
someone that just said yes to be nice. Like the energy there is different in how they show up,
That's true.
and like
That is very, very true.
we think we're doing our friends and our family and our loved ones a service by burning ourselves out, but we're doing the opposite actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And they sense it. People will sense it when we're resentful, when we're doing like half-hearted things, when we're not into the conversation because
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking about the work that you have to do, and now you're sitting here at brunch with your girls, and you don't want to be here. They're going to sense like, hey, Phoebe, are you here? Like, is everything okay? I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, everything's fine. But inside, girl, you lying. You
Yeah.
are lying.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's frustrating too when you have those people in your life where they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And like, they're not,
Yeah.
because I'm sure that's extra frustrating for you being a therapist, because like for me as a coach, like I want to then like coach those family members, but you can't do that without their consent. Like they have to want to change. You can't force
Yeah.
anyone to change.
Yeah. 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 That and it's so interesting you bring that up because I've learned over the years to turn that off as
Mm,
much as I can, right? And
yeah.
turning that off for me looks like reminding myself I'm here to be a friend, not a therapist. I'm here to be
Mm,
a daughter, not a therapist. I'm here to be a wife, not a therapist. There's many times where my husband will tell me like, stop talking to me like you're talking to your client. I'm not your client. And in the past, it felt kind of hurtful because it seemed almost like condescending.
mhm,
Like what you don't like the job that I do or something like that. But then
mhm,
I realized that what he was communicating to me was that I needed to be more present
mm,
as as a wife, as a partner, right?
yeah.
So so yeah, and at the same time, it can be hard to turn off because it's who we are, right?
Yeah.
So even as we're talking right now, I'm doing like, yeah, right, because that's who I am as a person, and that's what my clients get to see, and so sometimes it's mismatched, like it's all intertwined in
Mhm,
there, and it can be hard to kind of separate, right? But I think it takes work, and again, back to the whole topic of boundaries, it takes work for people like myself to be able to show up in difficult situations and not try to problem solve or not try
mm,
to you know take care of things the way that we would in our professional lives. It looks like, if for example I have a brother who is having a hard time with something, just showing up and listening, right? And
yeah.
pointing them to different resources. Like, I don't
Mhm,
need to do all of this, but here is the resource for you. Here is something that you can do. Here's someone that you can talk to, or here's a website for you to read,
mhm.
right? So that I'm not providing all the answers and doing all of these things, right? Because like I said, I'm not here to be a therapist. I'm here to be a sister. I'm here to be a friend,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And sometimes that like isn't, like they want us to be the friend or the sister. They don't want us to be the therapist. So if we
Mm-hmm.
are giving all these things, like
Yeah.
they probably turn their listening brain off. They're like, "Oh, I didn't ask for
Mm-hmm.
this. Why is she telling me to do all this? It's my life."
Right. One of my very, very best friends is a therapist, and I remember years ago having to have a conversation with her, like, hey, when we're talking about this, like, I need you to be my friend. I need a friend here. I don't need a therapist, because she would go into the, so what does it mean to you that blah 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 blah, and how are you processing blah blah. And I just remember myself just feeling so frustrated, like, no, my therapist is doing all the stuff. I need a friend right now to be like, girl, that sucks, or
Yeah.
just to be like, listen, who are we pulling up on, what's up, like, let's be ourselves, but I also understand that that self is also the therapist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes we just have to learn to turn things off in that way, but it can be
Hmm.
tough. It can be tough.
And before you were the therapist that you are now, you've shared with me before how I think you told me that you were studying biology as well,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, yeah.
So what was that like? Maybe there's like a little condensed version of like your journey of what you thought you wanted to do in life, and then when
Hmm.
that pivoted and how that led to you now being a therapist.
Yeah, I can think all the way back to about fifth grade. My mom had these books. One of them was called Every Woman, and I think that my if anyone who's listening here is Ghanaian, my fellow Ghanaians will remember that book because it was like called Every Woman, a gynecological guide to life. And it had
Okay.
all these pictures and talked about womanhood and it talked about sex and all these things. And I was so fascinated as a child. And so I was one of those kids who like blossomed very, very early. And so I was learning about all these things and learning about all these things that, were happening in my body. Like I hit puberty super early, didn't expect it. And I understood what was happening based on the things I was reading in this book. And my mom had kept this book, for example. She had a bunch of other ones, but she kept this book hidden. And I found it, because I was a very curious person. I still am. Like I will find it and I will
Yeah.
read it. So anyway, so that was where like I started having this curiosity about womanhood, what it means to be a woman, like the body, anatomy, all this stuff. So I just thought, like maybe this could be something that I could get into. And I had my first visit to a gynecologist very, very early. So I learned what a gynecologist was. I'm like, oh, you work only with women? Like, okay, I could do this one day. And so so there was that. And also growing up, I I had a very welcoming, and I still do. I have a very welcoming personality, and so people have found it easy to talk to me. So people were coming and talking to me about everything, right? I'm that person that I'll be walking in a store and someone would just come up to me and like just start chatting and telling me about their day and just it's just like yeah, people just have that come talk to me face. So I had that as a child, and so I always enjoyed listening to people and talking and giving advice as much as I could as a middle schooler or whatever or whatever. But I was picking up on some of these things that one I was reading in books and two watching on TV. And so fast forward to high school, I thought I wanted to be a sex therapist, right?
Okay.
And thinking back, I think it came from a place of my own trauma, especially at
Mm,
that age in my life, and wanting to make sense of the things that had happened to me and were happening to me.
hmm.
So I thought about that, but I still kept that whole doctor thing in the back of my mind because it felt like that was more acceptable, you know, because if I said I wanted to talk about sex, like I'll be chastised, and people were like, "Oh, you're a bad girl, you're naughty," and all that stuff. I'm not, I'm not spoiled. I'm not bad. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I immigrated to the U.S. I came as a student, and I was, determined to go to medical school and everything, and so I started college at Salem College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and it was hard. College was very, very hard for me. I was trying to adjust to being in a different country, different standards, with professors who wanted me to call them by their first name, like
Mm.
this culture shock, big time culture shock, and missing home too. And I was going
Oh
through a
yeah.
lot of depression at that time that, I don't think I recognized. And so I I went to declare my major. I was struggling through the sciences. I did all the prereqs for medical school and all that stuff, but I was struggling, and I went to declare my major, and my advisor was like, "Phoebe, what are you doing? You're excelling in psychology, and you suck at biology." He told me that. He looked in the face, bless his heart. Um, he looked in my face and told me that you suck. And I said, "Well, what am I gonna do? Like, how do I?" He said, "Yeah, just declare a psych major. Just do that." And to me, at that time, it was terrifying because my father was paying for me to go through college, and if I went to him and I told him that I was going to study psychology, it was going to be a problem because that wasn't the plan.
Yeah.
So yeah, my father called shakingly. I tell him about my decision, and he essentially tells me like you're wasting my money. Like, what are you gonna do with that? Like, what's the future in that? I said, well, I don't know yet, but I'm still gonna apply for medical school. When I applied, I didn't get into a single one. And even my MCAT scores, that in itself was telling because I scored really, really high on like the writing and analytical part, and the sciencey part, I failed over there. It was horrible. My score was horrible. I had a very peculiar score. So that in itself was telling. And so yeah, I ended up in grad school, and it was the best time of my life, really. Like, it was the most difficult time of my life in the sense that I had to face my traumas, I had to do my work. I started therapy myself at that time. I met some amazing, phenomenal people who are still in my life right now, and it was life changing, seriously. And I think that is what really gave me the foundation to be the therapist that I am today. So yeah, when medical school, it didn't happen. It didn't happen for many reasons, and I'm glad it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because I knew I wanted to be a healer. I knew I wanted to have the freedom to talk about things that people were afraid to talk about and didn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
I wanted to go there. I've always been one to like push against things, and that they used to tell me as a child I talked too much, and now I get paid to talk.
Oh, that's amazing that like you were able to listen to that calling of what you were meant to do. And it's still it's not a far cry from like what you were interested in as a kid, I love that.
Yeah, I get to do some healing work. I get to listen to people's struggles as they would if they went to a doctor's office. I help them to see that there's certain things that are contributing to what is going on with them, and I typically have them leaving feeling a lot happier. And I think it was when my father came to my practice, my office one time, that he came actually a few times. He was kind of like my pseudo security, and would sit at the front and welcome people in. And he even said he would see people coming in kind of like looking meh, not looking too excited, and they would leave and have a different countenance. They would leave and smiling and be laughing and everything. So, oh, okay, I guess you were in that. You didn't waste my money.
Yeah.
So that in itself is telling it. And I mean, I know that a lot of immigrants, especially African immigrants, can relate to that, kind of going into a field that is not so popular or so prestigious. Lawyer, doctor, nurse, accountant, engineer, that sort of thing. And so a lot of people, I feel, can relate to that. But at the same time, there's this shift that is happening because I think a lot of people are starting to see the importance of mental health, and really valuing the professionals who have chosen to make this their career and their life calling.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We're in a good place.
So I have some rapid fire questions I like to ask towards the end, and then we'll share again how to work with you, where to find you online. Okay? All right, let's dive in. So the first question is, what does self-love mean to you?
Self-love means everything to me. Self-love means prioritizing myself.
I love that. And then finish this phrase. The way to my heart is
food.
Love that. Same here. I love food.
Yes.
And then when do you feel most alive?
I feel most alive when I'm working with my clients and I see the progress that they're making, and I know that I had a hand in that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Also, when you were sharing about how your dad would see people walk out, like change, like it brought back memories of when I don't have a therapist now, but I used to be in therapy a lot, and it just felt so releasing. Even the sessions where I would like cry about something from my childhood, and then I'd feel so light afterwards.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then what is your favorite part about being a woman?
My favorite part about being a woman is that I am multifaceted, I'm multidimensional, and I can show up how I want to.
I love that. And where can our listeners find you online, find out more about you, and learn how they can work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. My page is Phoebe Brako LMFT. So PHEBEBRAKOLMF as in Fox, T as in Tango. And my website is the same thing, www.phoebebrakolmft.com. I'm also the founder and CEO of 253therapy.com. So if you look up 253 Therapy, you'll probably see me on there, acting all professional and all put together, like the CEO and all that stuff. But people still see that like, oh, it's Phoebe, and we're probably cackling and all that stuff. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And my podcast is still in the works. We went on hiatus for a while. But it's Immistories with Phoebe, and it's on all the podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Podcast, and Apple Podcasts as well too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. You'll have to give me those links so I could put it in the show notes.
Oh yeah, I sure will.
Yeah.
I sure will. So
thank you so much. This is awesome,
thank
Phoebe.
you.
This was nice.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm very, very grateful for us being able to connect. I'm grateful to Instagram for connecting us.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Openly Spoken. I know that there's an abundance of content online, so I really appreciate you giving me your ears today. If this episode shifted something for you, please share this with a friend and/or write us a podcast review if you're listening to this on iTunes so that more people can find this. If anything shifted for you from this episode that you want to have a conversation about, I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, and that is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.